Beyond the Cloud. In this video, we will show you how to patch private and isolated EC2 instances using AWS Systems Manager without needing the direct internet access. So by leveraging Systems Manager, you can automate patch management for your instances securely within a VPC. So Systems Manager is very useful and powerful tool to manage your servers or EC2 instances. And we will see a couple of services in action. Basically, this video is recommended by someone in my comment section, and I hope you really find this helpful. So if you are new to this channel, kindly like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts. Let me know what you liked and what you didn't. I will try to make some recommended video from you guys if you have any like this one. So sit tight and enjoy.
So today's topic is very exciting, and it is for AWS, and we are going to see how can we secure our infrastructure. So what is this all about? So our mission is we have to securely patch and update an EC2 instance without exposing it to internet. So we have servers or EC2 instance which are hosted in VPCs and which can be in public subnets or private subnets or isolated subnets. To make it really secure, our application infrastructure must reside or our data must reside inside an isolated subnets where there is no internet access. But there is a problem. How can we make the update to those servers, or how can we patch those servers? Because there is no internet connection. So our mission today would be to patch the servers or EC2 instances which doesn't have an internet access at all. And the vision is overall application security or the infrastructure security. Our infrastructure will be more secure if we do in this way. So we have the general architecture. This is a very good example that I will give you, where a person which is really isolated, who really lives in a cave and who doesn't know that fire has been introduced. So how can he get the updates? Because for him, the outside world doesn't exist. So and if you think about it, it's very hard to make him understand that there is some updates happening out to the outside world. So similarly, our EC2 instance, which are really in isolated subnets or which doesn't have any internet access, any outside world connection, how can we get update to those instances? So there actually Systems Manager comes into picture, and we will do everything with our Systems Manager today. So there is a general architecture that I have came up with, and if you see the architecture here, we will have two subnets. One is two private subnets, and another one is public subnet. So on those two subnets, we will spin up two EC2 instances. So one private subnet is really private. That means it is really isolated. There is no internet connectivity at all. But another private subnet will have an EC2 instance which have an internet connectivity with the NAT gateway. You see here a NAT gateway in the public subnet. So the private subnet which have a NAT gateway associated with the route table have an internet connectivity, so the patching can go on for this very easily, but not for the isolated ones. So for the isolated ones, you really need to do some things to get the patching enabled and to have it securely, because you do not want to expose your isolated instances, which is really secure and which maybe a restricted application is hosted there to internet. So that's why, how can we do that is the question. So this is how we will do it, and this is the overall architecture. We will go through this architecture in detail in our next topic in our demo session. So till that, just let me remind you, this will be the overall architecture. So that's it. So this is how I wanted to show you, and this is now the demo time. So we will go and do some practical, and we will get our hands dirty to the AWS console. So I hope you already have an AWS management console that is open. So if not, please open that, and then I will also go there and I will come back with AWS console. I'm inside my AWS console, and you can choose. I will choose the Frankfurt region. You can choose whatever region you want to follow this tutorial. Uh, just see that if you have access to those region, to the services that we will be discussing. First of all, very important thing. So we will have so this will be our overall architecture, and to have this overall architecture, this is the overall architecture. So to have this overall architecture, we just need couple of network configuration. What kind of network configuration? We need one VPC, we need two private subnets, and we need one public subnet. So far so good. So we have this VPC, and we will be working on this VPC. And after our network setup, the whole network, the resource mapping should look like this. So if you see the resource mapping, so this will be our VPC. We will have public subnets, two public subnets there, and we already have two public subnets, and we have two private subnets. But we are not interested in the public subnets. Only one public subnet is enough. But we are mostly interested in the private subnets. Among those private subnets, one is really isolated. So if you see this one, private subnet B, this is really isolated. So it is coming to the right isolated route table, and then it is not going anywhere. It has only one S3 gateway access. But the other private subnet have a public private route table, and from that private route table, it goes to the NAT gateway. From the private route table, it goes to the NAT gateway. So this is very important, or this is very important infrastructure that I wanted to show you that one of the private subnet or one of the private EC2 instance that will be hosted in the private subnet. I don't know which one it will be. It might be A, it might be B, but the one that will be hosted in a private subnet that will be totally isolated from everything, that will not have any kind of internet access. And our mission is to patch the EC2 instance hosted on that particular subnet. So right now, if you see, if you select the VPC and if you go to the resource map, you see the structure is not the one that we want. Right now we have public subnet, which is going from public route table. So we have public route table. So in this public route table, this public subnet routes is coming, and it is going to directly to the internet gateway. And if you see the NAT, it is coming to the private route table, but the private route table is not going anywhere. It is just staying there, and the private subnets is also going to only this private route table, but it is not going anywhere. So this is not correct. So we want to have an infrastructure which really looks like this. So how to make this? So to make this, we will first have to configure something. So first of all, we have to create one route table. So one isolated route table. So we already have private route table and public route table, but we need one isolated route table, or we can use the main route table as well. We can use the main route table, and we can just associate one of the subnet to it. I can see one of the subnets is already associated, that is the private subnet, private subnet A. Both of them actually, private subnet B as well. So, but we have to route this private subnet B to this private route table, that so that it can go to the NAT. So, what we can do to very flexible, or to very easily to have this main route table. So I hope you already have a route table in your account. So if you go to route table, right now I have three route table. One is the public route table, and another one is the private route table, and another one is the default route table. If you don't have all this route table, you must have a default route table, which is the main route table. If you don't have the other two, you can just create those. And other than that, I will show you everything. So maybe for the main route table, let's name it isolated, because this traffic is not going anywhere. And if you see the routes are local. There is not these routes are not going anywhere. So I make this route table as isolated. Okay. Now, if you go to the public route table, there are two subnets associated with it. One is the public subnet 1 and public subnet A and public subnet B. This is fine. And if you go to routes, you see from the public subnet route table, the local routes is going to here. This is fine. And apart from the local route, everything is going to the internet gateway, which it is supposed to be. So my public route table is fine. And another one is the private route table. And if you see the route, it only have this local route that is going nowhere, and apart from the local route, everything else will go to the NAT gateway, which is supposed to be like that. So if you see the desired infrastructure, our public subnet, two public subnet is fine because it has the public route table with internet gateway, but one of the private subnet must have association with the private route table to NAT gateway. Now, if you see here, the private route table, the route is associated with the NAT gateway, but the subnet is not associated. So we will associate one of the subnet, that is the private subnet, maybe A, to this route table. So on the right hand side, you will be able to select this edit subnet association. If you select the private route table, and on the subnet association, you select this edit subnet association, and maybe the private A I will associate with this route table. So now I have associated private subnet to this route table, and from my private subnet, that means whatever resource I will spin up in my private subnet A that already have an internet access with the NAT gateway. But what about the subnet associated with B? The subnet associated, or the resources associated with the subnet private B, will not have any kind of internet access. So that's why we will associate this subnet to the isolated one. Now if you come to isolated one, the routes are only local, it's not going anywhere. And if you go to subnet association, edit subnet association, and I will select private B and save association. So my subnet association is done. So my subnet B routes are not going anywhere. So the routes are all local. Now if you see the VPC resource map, you will be able to see that everything is set up correctly. Now if you select internet gateway, so the internet gateway can be accessed by public subnets, which is the desired state. If you select the NAT gateway is only available via this private subnet A, which is the desired state. But apart from that, my private subnet B doesn't have any route to internet. So it is isolated as it is. So the resources in private subnet B doesn't have any internet, doesn't have any update or anything. So this is what we want, and this is what our network infrastructure should be. Now we will spin up two resources, two EC2 instances. One is private subnet A and another one is the private subnet B. So let's go to the EC2 console and let's launch one instance, and I will give the instance name as private, and I will select Amazon Linux 2023. This is fine. And to be in free tier, just select Tree2 Micro. I don't need a key pair right now. All I need, you can create a security group, and SSH traffic is fine. So what you can do, not do any SSH traffic. This is fine, but you can do HTTPS traffic. So we have to do HTTPS traffic from our inside VPC. Because this SSM agent tries to reach two instances via this HTTPS connection. So for that, we will allow on both of the instances via the security group only HTTPS traffic from inside this VPC. Okay. So in the network setting, all we will change is the VPC, that is our subnet VPC, sandbox VPC, and the and the subnet that we will select is the one that is really private one, not the isolated one. So I hope this is the private A. So let's verify once again, and if we go to VPC and resource mapping, and if I select private A, so private A has a route to NAT gateway which can access internet. So I will select private A. So this is my private instance. So this is my private instance, and this is fine. Security group, and I will add another security group. So basically I don't need a SSH, so I will change this one to HTTPS traffic 443 not from anywhere custom, and the custom is the one where I will give the VPC CIDR range. So inside from my VPC, this needs to be raised. So this is fine. So this is a secure connection. So from inside VPC, HTTPS connection allowed on 443 port to my instance. And remember, the security group is launch wizard 6. This one we will select for my second instance as well. And apart from that, we will not change anything. So we have given a name, Amazon Linux 2023, do not need a key pair. VPC private subnet, we have selected private subnet A, where it has a NAT gateway association, and the auto assign public IP is already disabled for my private subnets. So this is fine, and that's all. And we have only changed the security group, which is allowing HTTPS traffic on port 443 within my VPC. I will launch the instance. So this is my private instance. And apart from that, I need another instance, which is the isolated one, really isolated. And in the isolated instance, this is the only changes the subnet. So the VPC is fine. I will select the private subnet B. Auto assign public IP is disabled by default. And I will not take the create security group. I will choose an existing security group, and I will select launch wizard 6. And this is where in my instance where HTTPS traffic on port 443 is reaching to my instance and required for SSM. And I will not change anything else, and that's it. And now I will launch the instance. So my 2 instance is launching. So I will just instance state is running. This will I filter, and that's it. So you see my 2 instance is running. One is the isolated instance, and if you see the isolated instance, in the details section there is no public IPv4 address. If you go to security, you see only port 443 is allowed within my VPC, and there is outbound connection is okay. We have to give outbound connection to all, because for the SSM agent to communicate. And in the networking section, we see it is associated in the private subnet B, the isolated one, and private subnet B doesn't have any kind of internet access. This is the desired state. And another one, where is the private instance, this one have a security group similar to the other one, and it has a network configuration. It has a private subnet A configuration, and private subnet A is actually have a internet connection through net. So this is my desired state, and my EC2 instances are configured properly. Now the main question. So the main question is, how can we patch those instances? So there are a couple of things. So first of all, we can use Systems Manager for automated patching. AWS Systems Manager, if you search with Systems Manager here, you go to Systems Manager, and then AWS Systems Manager is an automated tool where you can manage your instance. Managing your instance means you can see your instance, you can see the inventory of softwares that is installed in your instance, you can patch your instance, you can monitor your instance, you can run a couple of commands to your instance. So if you want to know more about Systems Manager and how it works, I have a really detailed video in my earlier section of my videos. You can just go through the Systems Manager and how it works, you will get an idea. But this lecture is not about expanding the Systems Manager, rather than using one of its feature to use the patching for my instance. So if you Come to Systems Manager, there is a Patch Manager section which actually guide you through how to patch your instances. And you can create a patch policy. If you have an organizational requirement that your instance must be patched to a custom patch baseline, you can create this here. Under the patch baseline, you can create custom patch baseline and you can associate this patch baseline to your instance. This depends from organization to organization, but for this demo purpose, to be very simple, I will just use this run patch baseline, which is from AWS, and this will have all the required patches or the mandatory patches, and that needs to be allowed to the instances. I will not create any patch baseline, but from enterprise perspective, you can create it, you can associate it with your instance, and this is required in an enterprise. So, and there are a couple of fleet manager. If your instances are running, it will come up here. But the very first thing that we will do is go to quick setup, which is a very nice feature of AWS. So this will a banner will come where the quick setup is available. So you can ignore this banner. So there is no need. So what can you do with quick setup? You can use config recorder, confirmation packs, DevOps Guru, distributor, host management, patch manager, and resource scheduler. All things you can explore by your own, and you can see how it works. You can create a configuration with this quick setup, and everything will be done automatically. Right now in this demo, we are only interested in the patching those instances, patching our private and isolated instance. So under quick setup, we will select patch manager and I will select create. When you select create, it will ask you to create a patching policy for your instance. So the patching policy, I will just give a name to it, patch policy maybe, and then it will ask you what do you want to do with this policy, whether you want to just scan those instances and see what are the patches are missing, or do you want to scan and install the patches. So I will select scan and install, basically scanning the, so if it is scanning automatically, then it should also patch automatically, because I don't want to take the scanning output and patch those instances manually, because that is a very troublesome job for me. So I will select scan and install. This is for scanning scheduling, and this is for installation schedule. I will use the recommended schedule where it says that patch manager install patches once a week at 2 a.m. UTC on Sunday. You can do it custom as well. You can choose frequency daily, custom cron expression and everything. But for demo purpose, I will choose custom recommended defaults. I will anyway run the patch baseline manually just to show you then and there. Otherwise, if you select this recommended one, it will patch your instances once a week, but it will scan for patches every day. But I will not select wait to install updates until the first cron interval. I will not select this one. You also don't have to select this one, so that it can run then and there. Now the next one is the patch baseline. I will use the use recommended defaults because it will take the AWS default patches for your Linux instances, because remember we have selected the Linux instance for Linux instances or Linux images for our instances. So I will select the recommended one. You can select the custom one where it will show you couple of patches, what you want to choose or what you don't. But I don't want to make this too much complicated, so I will use the recommended default ones. And then this is very important one where you want to log the storage of the patch. So for this, we go to S3 and maybe we can create a bucket. The bucket name is maybe our channel name, then patch scan and run. That's it. And I will just create the bucket, and this is my bucket where it wants to store patching operation logs for my patch policy. And if you browse the S3 and then if you select this patch and scan run and then choose, then my S3 location is selected. So the output should store here should be stored here in my S3 bucket. So I okay. Mhm. So I will just view this bucket once. It says that Frankfurt region cannot be found in Stockholm region, but yeah, there is this wrong information coming up. But anyway, it the bucket is taken up now properly. And next is the target. So in the target, you can choose a couple of region where you want to have this patch policy associated. But for this demo purpose, as I said, I am choosing this Frankfurt region. So you can just select this current region and this is fine. The target nodes, this is very important. So the target node is where you want to apply the patch policy or where you want to scan and install the patches. So I will select all managed nodes. More nodes, you can select manually. You can select either one node or two node. But for this demo purpose, I will select all managed node because I want to run the same patches to all the instances because my instances are all of Amazon Linux too. So I will select all managed nodes, and the rate control, you don't have to do anything here. This is for something like how many nodes can be run at a time and what is the error threshold. You don't have to change anything. This by default is fine. This is very important instance profile option. So whenever you are working with systems manager and systems manager needs a role to access the EC2 instance. So either you have to create it and associate it with your EC2 instance, or you can ask systems manager to create one for you. So if you check this box, then systems manager will create a role for accessing the EC2 instance, and it will have those policies attached to the roles. So this is fine, and this is why I say that, hey, systems manager, go ahead and create the roles and do whatever you want. And then the local deployment roles, and this is also needed because the policy needs to be deployed and then it needs to be run. So for this deployment, it also needs to create a role. So I will also select that use a new IAM to local deployment roles. So basically my roles and policies doesn't cost me anything, so I will select use a new AWS IAM role. And that's it. Basically the name is patch policy, description is I don't need, and tag very good to have. You can give tag, but right now I don't want to give it. So that's it. So this is my overall configuration. Policy name, I need to scan and install. I will use the recommended baseline. I have given one S3 bucket for log retention for my current region, and all managed nodes are selected, and then I will create. So whenever you will select the create, it will take 2 to 3 minutes for this overall setup to complete. So I will come back after 2 to 3 minutes. So now I see. That the quick setup is completed, and here you see the patch policy is something that one pending, one success, configuration deployment status, blah blah blah, and everything. But I'm not interested here. The quick setup is done, so we will leave quick setup. We will come back here in the state manager, and on the state manager we will be able to see that couple of association is created, and the main association that I'm interested in is the AWS run patch baseline. So I will come to here, but before that, you see couple of association is created, right? One for inspector, one for quick setup, and everything. Yeah, inspector distribution, like that. So why it is created? So when you asking systems manager to do quick setup for your patching policy, it also gathers all the software information for your EC2 instances, and it gives the software information to inspector, which is a investigating tool in AWS. And if you want to know more about inspector, I have a video for that, you can look into it. So inspector gathers your software inventory information and it checks for the vulnerabilities and give you the details. Apart from that, quick setup also do one scan to your instances and see what kind of patch baseline you have and what is needed and what not. So this is why you see AWS run patch baseline, this ran, and if you select this association ID according uh, this one, and if you select the execution history here, you see the execution is done here for the first time. And on the execution ID, if you select there, currently there is nothing, which is fine. And if you come back to targets, you see the instance IDs start. That means all the instance IDs will have this association, which is great, which is fine. Now the next one that I wanted to go here is the fleet manager. And under the fleet manager, this one is the where you manage your EC2 instances. And if you click on get started, currently there is no EC2 instances are showing up here. So let's check the configuration ones. So we have our EC2 instances. So the private EC2 instances, this one, and this have a subnet of private A, which that means it has a NAT association, and also the private instance have a security group which is saying the port 443 is achievable within the VPC. Still, this instance should be showing up in the managed nodes in the fleet manager, but it's not. Sometimes this happens. In that case, what you need to do, you just restart this instance. So what I will do, I will stop the instance. Let's see whether it is stopped or not. I will do now, and this is stopped now, and then I will start the instance. So my instance is starting up, and now it is running. So you see the private EC2 instance. If I refresh this page, another thing I wanted to show you is that let me give the filter, and the private EC2 instance, this should show up in the SSM console. Why? Because the SSM role is also attached to it. It is attached by default. It is attached by default by the policy manager that we created by SSM, and it also have proper network configuration. That means this should be available in the managed node. Now if I go to managed node, here you see the instance came up then and there. So sometimes you don't need to restart your instances or reboot your instances, but sometimes you do. So this is now you see ACC16. So my ACC16, this instance came up in the managed nodes. Now again in the fleet manager, there my node is showing up. What does it mean? That means systems manager can access my instance. Systems manager can access the SSM agent inside the instance and communicate over it and gather the software inventory. You see the agent version is also showing, and the ping status is online. That means the SSM agent is online. And if I go to state manager now, I just wanted to show you that the run patch baseline, what happened or not. So if you select this run patch baseline, this is fine. This will, the status failed. If you also see the status is failed, this is fine. The first time it fails actually. I will do the apply association now, and there is a okay, here is the button apply association. So if you select this apply association, so the run patch baseline document will be applied to this particular instance then and there. So I will select apply patch baseline, and if I select apply, so you see it is now pending. And if I go inside this association ID here, and again the execution history, uh, let me just refresh this one again. It's still pending. So I will wait for a couple of minutes here for this association to complete. It's still pending actually. Right now you see it is pending. The detailed status is in progress. The status is pending. Let's see when it is getting completed. Now you see it is success. That means the association, the AWS run patch baseline has run. It scanned the instance properly and it's installed couple of patches. Now, if you select this execution ID, you will be able to see the instance that is associated with it, and then the output. And if you click on the output, it will open the run command console for you, and it will give you the output. And the output is here, where it says that, yeah, this is all the operating system level, where it downloaded the payload of the patch, and then downloading the baseline override, and then everything with the instance ID, patch groups is selected, loading patch snapshot from subnets, and at the end, installation process started, and it will install all the patches that was missing from the instances. Okay, that means my execution or my run patch baseline is running properly. This one is running properly, and if you don't do anything, it will automatically scan all your instances. Right now it is only one instance, and it will uh, apply all the patches every Sunday, and your instance is compliant. Your instance is not vulnerable anymore. All the security related patches are applied to it. All the mandatory patches are applied. This is fine. Okay, now the second question, and which is the vital one. Okay, my private EC2 instance is showing up here. Why not the isolated one? Because we are more interested in the isolated patching the isolated instance. So the isolated instance will not show up here till now in the fleet manager. Why? Because if you see the isolated instance where it is situated in the sandbox private B, doesn't have any internet connectivity or doesn't have any connectivity at all with the outside world. The routes are just staying there inside the subnets. So we have to make the connection, or we have to reach the instance, or we have to reach to the subnet in a secure way other than the internet gateway or the NAT gateway. How can we do that? So AWS provides couple of service to do that, and one of the services very important is the endpoint service. So first of all, we have to create couple of endpoints within this among this private subnet, which will be associated with the private subnet. Then through that endpoint, our instances will get all the updates, and through that endpoints only, SSM agents can access the instance within this isolated VPC. So we have to create couple of endpoints for our isolated subnets. So let's create couple of endpoints. Now, for the SSM agent to run properly, there are 5 endpoints that we have to create, and we will create one by one. So first of all, let's create the first endpoint, and the first endpoint is the EC2 endpoint. The EC2 endpoint is required because our instance is an EC2 instance. So as simple as that. Now if you select EC2, I will select EC2, and from the AWS service, this is the EC2 endpoint, and this is the interface type of endpoint, and then from VPC I will select the VPC, and then on the subnet I will select my private subnet A. So this is the subnet that we are interested in, right? So if you again go to VPC just to be sure. How can you check that? I will show you. So in the subnet, inside the VPC, if you see VPC resource mapping, we are interested mainly on the private subnet B. So we will select this, sorry, here in this U central B, private B. So we will associate this endpoint to our private subnet B. You can of course associate with other subnets as well, but our instance is in private subnet B, so that's why we will associate it here. We can verify the subnet association from our isolated instance as well. If you select the isolated instance, go to networking. If you select, and the subnet ID is the last one is 19FD, and we will create the endpoint in that particular subnet. So you see 19FD, this is the subnet, and this is the subnet we are interested in. This is the isolated subnet, and this is where we need our endpoint. Okay, now the security group, the security group, I will choose the one that I have associated with our EC2 instance. So launch wizard 6, this is fine. So this is my EC2 endpoint, and I will create the endpoint. Another endpoint, the second endpoint I have to create is for EC2 messages, and for EC2, and this is for EC2 messages. This is required for SSM for connectivity of or running the commands inside the EC2 or communicating with EC2. This is for EC2 messages required, and I will select the same sandbox VPC, and on the private subnet B, that is the 19FD, and our isolated instance is in 19FD. This is fine, and I will choose the same security group, and I will create. So my EC2 message endpoint is created. Now the main one, SSM, and I will choose the service as SSM as well, and hit enter, and you see this one, SSM. This will be the com Amazon AWS dot region, then in SSM, and I will select the same VPC with the same subnet, our private B, isolated subnet. So fine, and launch widget 6, and I will create the endpoint, and then I will create another endpoint for SSM messages. This is also required for to be able to run our commands, or to be mainly used by run commands. Okay, so we will select the VPC and then our private subnet, private B, then launch wizard 6 and create endpoint. Another one is needed is for S3, because if you remember the run commands, you see here it tries to download the patch baseline mainly from the S3. So we need one S3 endpoint, and this S3 endpoint we will create a gateway endpoint. So S3, and then this is the gateway endpoint, and for VPC I will choose the sandbox VPC, and I will choose the main route table is this one. Why the name is not showing up? Here is the route table, so isolated route table is fine, and I will create the endpoint. So all my endpoints are created. So okay, this is very important, this part. So we have created 5 endpoints. One is EC2, one is EC2 message, another one is SSM, another SSM message, and another one is S3. So this is very important, and these 5 endpoints are required for our isolated instances. This 5 is not required. Mainly the EC2, SSM and SSM messages required. I have created EC2 messages as well, and S3 is also required. So these are required to have our instances properly communicating securely and isolated way to our SSM agent and systems manager. Now if you go to manage nodes, refresh, this is still not showing up. This is fine, but inside this VPC, now if you refresh, or if you refresh this whole page and go to resource map, you see now my private P have an isolated route table, or this is the isolated subnet, but it has a S3 route, or the gateway endpoint to S3. So it can access an S3 bucket right now, and it can grab the data out of it. And also it has now the VPC endpoint association, which will help our instance to privately communicate with SSM agent without going to public internet. But you see that I still not see the instances in the manage node. For that, this is everything is fine. What we will do, we will reboot the instance. So again, we will stop the instance, our isolated instance one. We are stopping. Okay, now it stopped, and I will now run the instance or start the instance. Okay, so I have initiated a starting of the instance, so it is still pending. It will run in couple of seconds. So now I see my instance is running. So my isolated instance is also now running. Now if I go to manage nodes, It will take some time, so let's wait for a couple of minutes to show up here in the managed nodes. Okay, now here I can see after a couple of seconds after refreshing, my second instance is also showing up, that is AE1, and this instance is this one, AE1, which is a really isolated instance, and it is showing up here in the managed nodes. Now if you go to our association state manager, and then the run patch baseline execution history, this one failed is fine. Now if what we will do, we will apply the association again. So whenever we will apply the association, it will again take all the instances in my account or all the instances that is showing up in the managed nodes, and it will try to patch those instances. So if I go inside of it, execution history, right now it is pending. So let's wait for a couple of seconds. And you see here ACC 16 managed instance, this is already successful. I will wait for a couple of seconds for the second to be successful, that is the isolated instance, and it is still pending. Let's wait for a couple of seconds. I will click here and there because I cannot wait for so long. So anyway, okay, so in the fleet manager it is showing up, that's what I show, that's why I have shown you, and then it is still in progress. Yeah, now it is success. So this is my isolated instance and it is success. And if you go to the output of the instance, you see here this is the same thing. It downloaded the baseline from S3 and it applied all the patches one by one, which was pending. So this is what I wanted to show you. And right now I can see all my instances are up and running. All my instances are managed by SSM and Systems Manager. I have scheduled one patching policy as well, which is running AWS Run Patch Baseline, which is running once a week to patch all my instances, and everything is okay. And this is what I wanted to show you. So in a nutshell, what we have done here, this one here is that we had two private subnets. One is really isolated and another one is the private one, which had a NAT gateway association, and it both those two instances associated situated on those private subnets have now systems manager accessibility, and systems manager can now patch those instances. So one is really private isolated and another one is in the private subnet with NAT gateway. So I hope you really enjoyed this video and I hope you learned something out of it. So if you are new to this channel, kindly like, share, subscribe and comment your thoughts. Let me know what you liked and what you didn't, and let me know some suggestions for that you want to have a video on. Maybe I will do something about it in my next videos. So I will be back with another exciting video. So till then, take care and goodbye.